As always, another day, another book reading live. Today we are reading chapter 2. Another day, another book reading live. Today we are reading chapter 2 of the book A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen L. Peck. If you're here for the first time, I do daily chapter readings of the book of the week, the book I'm reading that week, but I don't read everything completely. I just read for 30 minutes that chapter. I read that chapter for 30 minutes. That's how the life is. If you would like me to change anything about it, just let me know in the comments and I would consider it. If you are here and you have not subscribed, please subscribe and thank you. Let's get into the reading. A Short Stay in Hell, Chapter 2. As always, we threw over the railing into the great chasm between the two great bookcases. As always, starting again. As always, the books we threw over the rail into the great chasm between the two great bookcases were restored to their proper place on the shelves the next morning. Every morning, we lived through more books in hopes of finding our story. And then, after noting the consistent sea of random texts tirelessly heaved over, let's do that again. Every morning, we lived through more books in hopes of finding our stories. And then, after noting the consistent sea of random texts tirelessly heaved them over the side. It was getting discouraging. I had not found even a single sentence that made sense. However, a few days later, Biscuit started dancing and shouting with joy. He called us over and we all looked in envy when he showed us he had found something that made sense. It was the phrase, "sack it." "What does it mean?" Sam said. Sam was a short, quiet young man who had formed a sort of clique with Elliot, Larissa, Biscuit, Dolores, and me. Biscuit looked thoughtful. "I'm not sure. Let's see. A sack is something you use to carry something in. Maybe it means I'm going to go somewhere soon and we'll need a sack." "What makes you think it means anything?" I started to say, but I looked at Biscuit and he began to cry, then sobbed. Tears slid down his cheeks and he smiled at us, nodding his head as if affirming something we could not understand. We all were a little surprised. Dolores softly put her arms around him and he turned to hug her as he continued to weep. "I'm sorry," he said through his tears. "It's just that," he broke off, then said, "when I was alive, Finally, after another bout of weeping, he steadied himself, laughed at himself, and started again. "When I was alive on Earth, as you all know, I was homeless and chronically mentally ill. I had an old green army laundry bag that I carried everything in. It was a sack that held everything I owned. A couple of times at night, I've woken up reaching for it like I used to. It was my most prized possession. I carried that sack for 23 years, until one day the bottom fell out. I couldn't let it go even then. I hitchhiked to the Vietnam Memorial and placed it on the monument right above a friend's name. There was a moment of silence as we considered this. "You were in Nam?" Elliot asked. Biscuit just nodded. "I was in the South Pacific in World War II. If you ask me, that was more of a hell than this giant bookshelf." Dolores began telling a rather silly story of how a sack was significant in her life when she had carried one from an exclusive department store to her school, and one of the cool girls had been jealous, and she and her friends had laughingly ripped it to smithereens. Within a few minutes, we all found meaningful or terrible stories about sacks in our life. I even shared a story about a sack I threw away at Christmas time with a $50 check in it. Biscuit, though, took it as a sign that all would be well, and Dolores as a sign of comfort and hope. To be honest, I thought it was just a random word, but I didn't say anything to the others. They seemed particularly moved by Biscuit's story. He held on to the book all that day and took it to bed with him that night. Sure enough, because he held on to it, the book wasn't returned to its place on the shelf. In the morning, it was still in his arms when he woke up. All the rest of the week, he carried it with him, much like the sack he once loved so much. After 2 days, he found even more meaning in the world. It turned out that sack was on page 345 on line 21, which, if you reverse the 21, makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 backwards. So the word sack was found starting on letter 27 of the line and ending on letter 30, which are both divisible by 3, which, if you multiply by the 2 and the 7 in 27 respectively, gives you 6 and 21. Now, since you still need to get a single digit, you divide the 21 by 3, which gives you 7 back. So now, not only do you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you have 6 and 7. Now, go back to the 27 and divide by 3. So you get 9, and divide the 30 by 3, and you get what? 10. So then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10. Now, says Biscuit, take the 3 and the 0 in 30 and add them together, and you get 3, which added to the last number in the first chain you found, which is 5, which gives you 8. So the numbers of the page line, the numbers of the page, line, and characters produce the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Biscuit was beside himself. His first few days in hell were ringing with meaning. What does it mean? I asked, innocently enough, unsure of what finding the first 10 cardinal numbers in such a convoluted fashion meant. Biscuit looked at me like a schoolmaster looks at an errand rapscallion. Don't you see? This gives us the number of years we will search before finding what we seek. Sack signifies that the thing that has the most meaning to us here, the book of our life story, will be found in 10 years. That's a long time to stay in the library. I hope it's days or weeks. My heavens. 10 years. Oh, I skipped. Let's go back. Sack signifies that the thing that has the most meaning to us here, book of our life story, will be found in 10 years. It gives the times of our stay here. It might mean 10 days or 10 weeks, but I suspect, given the magnitude of our tax, 10 years is not unreasonable. Oh, I said. Dolores was not too happy with this interpretation. 10 years? That's a long time to stay in a library. I hope it's days or weeks. My heavens, 10 years will go party. That night, in the absolute silence and darkness, I lay in my lonely bed, thinking about the length of the library. I liked the idea of finding the end of a floor, just to confirm there was an end to these rows and rows of books. Then we could look for the bottom or the top and start a systematic search for our book. I made up my mind. After a week of being in this place, I also wanted to see how many people were here. I thought it strange we'd only find odd people that all spoke English, and all of us made only to all understood. As far as we had been able to gather from the group around our area, we had all died within 60 years of each other. I was curious if this held throughout the library. I suppose that I really wondered. What I really wondered was whether my wife was hidden somewhere in the vast reaches of this building. Maybe she had lived out her life and died and come to this strange place. Maybe I could find her. At some point, I must have fallen asleep because suddenly I found the lights coming back on and the brightness of morning revealing our world and pushing back the abyss of darkness that made up our nights. Our little gang of 5 typically gathered at dusk in the morning, where the others would have a cup of coffee. I took my cup ever on this morning. Being a Mormon, I had never even tasted coffee, let alone drunk a whole cupful. How could that matter now? Zoroastrianism had been shown true, and I that had no prohibitions against it. Still, it was hard. Lifelong habits are not easily broken. Keeping the word of wisdom, as we Mormon called our health code, had always been taken as a sign of my righteousness, my worthiness to attend the holy temple and to participate fully in the church. Even here in hell, after a lifetime of keeping the word of wisdom, I was having an ugly time deciding whether to try a cup. This is my first cup of coffee. This is my first cup of coffee, I announced somewhat apprehensively to the usual gang. Any suggestions? It started a small argument. When Biscuit suggested black so I could experience the taste in its full and unaltered purity. Larissa insisted that I ease into it. Don't you remember how nasty it was the first time you tasted it? Let's not scare him away, for heaven's sake. Larissa prevailed, and I ordered a mild mocha. Everyone watched, holding their breaths as I brought the small white cup to my lips and took a sip of rich brown liquid. It tasted like crap, the most bitter and disappointed taste I have ever encountered. Everyone laughed and patted me on the back. They all congratulated the Mormon boy for breaking with his past. I finished the cup, but I felt like I had betrayed something deep within me. Only a little over a week in hell, and I had abandoned a lifelong belief. What if this was some sort of trial God had arranged to test my backbone? What if this hell was really all a ruse come by God to see what I was made of? But no, there was something real and final about this hell. I can't describe it, but there was a deep sense that this was more real than anything I had experienced on earth. The difference in the quality of consciousness between dreaming and being awake was close to the difference between our old life and the one here. This reality carried with it a profound sense of itself, a deep sense that this hell was indeed just what it seemed to be. There was a truth in it that denied second guessing. I really felt and now believed Zoroastrianism was the one true religion, and I was truly and undeniably in hell. I would be here on the way out. Also, and this odd to me, just as I believed in the physical reality presented to me, I believed I would find the book about my life I was expected to, and one day slip it into the appointed slot and be free. I wondered why I believed it all, but I clearly did. Even when I tried to formulate doubts about my experience, I found I was only playing with doubting. I really believed I was where the demons said I was. I was in hell, and there was no denying it. It was as if my entire consciousness, like a computer program, now had a script imposed on it, compelling me to believe this experience was an actuality that brooked no argument. It was as if my neutral wiring had been rewritten in accordance with a modified version of Descartes' famous dictum, I think, therefore I am. Now it was, I think I am in hell, therefore I am. Despite this perception of reality, I felt strangely myself as well. I was still the Mormon, still the geologist, still as curious, still loved my wife and missed my children terribly. I thought about all the time and what they were doing right then. I wondered if right then even made sense. Did time in the same as time on earth? Did my week here take a week on earth? Did it take 1,000 years or 20 nanoseconds? Was there no frame of time? Was there no frame of reference? Of course not, I thought. There are people here who died over 50 years ago, and a woman who died 30 years after me. Yet, here the days passed as I remembered them. Time on the large clock seemed to sweep through a second the same way it did on clocks back on Earth. While I was thinking about this, Biscuit tried to get some cigarettes. They did. He died a short of which to his appeared in a shot in the kiosk. He tossed it down with his eye and asked for another. A little thing, he declared, that knocked back a third, and it strangely, after 7, seemed to be effect on him. After he was getting dead. Fake, he declared. Suddenly, his eyes lost their focus and he staggered against the rail. His plastered, Dolores giggled. Not plastered, he slurred. One more for the road. He quaxed. How do you pronounce it? He quaxed the kiosk and he gave him one. Hell, give me a puddle. The kiosk gave him a bottle and he opened it and started chugging. It wasn't long before others joined in. The people across the Gulf saw what was going on over on our side and started rounds of drinks. This was too much for me. I was still reeling from ordering an evil cup of coffee. So as everyone began drinking, I walked away. For the last week or so, I had not ventured much further than a couple 100 yards or so from the bathroom near where I had appeared. But now, I just wanted to get away. People were carrying large steins of beer and telling me to drink up. It was hellfest. I could not. So I started to run down the hall. Always a good runner when I was young. I found my new youthful body was in wonderful shape. I would guess I was doing about a 6.5 minute mile and felt I could do it forever. So I ran. I ran for a little over 3 hours. The strange thing in hell is you always know what time it is. The grey clocks are always visible. Along the way, I met others like myself. But strangely, they were all white and all spoke English with an American accent as they waved or gave a short greeting. After a brief rest and a little orange juice, I started again. I was determined to answer the question of how large the library was by finding the end of the floor I was on. It could not be too far. Maybe 100 miles or so. If I ran, say, 8 miles in an hour, that would put me at about 64 miles a day. So on I ran. I ran past people I did not know, past the endless stacks of books, bedrooms, and kiosks. By about 6 p.m., I was starting to and stopped to rest. The people gathered around as I came to a sweaty stop near where they were gathered, talking quietly. I introduced myself and told them what I was doing. They seemed excited about the project and told me I could stay in their bedroom. I was a little disturbed that they thought it was theirs, because I realized that in searching for our books, we were going to have to move around. I slipped away to take a quick shower and took one of the robes lying in one of the beds. I paused for a minute, hoping I had not offended anyone by co-opting their space. I knew, however, that sometime during the day, at some point when everyone had left the bedroom, all the beds would be made, bathrooms cleaned, and a clean robe laid on the bed with a new pair of slippers. Any dirty towels on the floor would be replaced and all would be tidied up. But being new to this area of the library, it was impossible for me to tell if any of the beds had been cleaned. So I grabbed one. I walked back out and held what I would learn to call the unusual conversation. Who I was, where I had lived, what wonderful things I had accomplished, the things that had been left undone, who I missed, and what I should have done differently, and how, and finally how I died. At about 9:50, I went into the bedroom and asked where I should sleep. In this room, it turned out only 2 of the bunks were clean. I was so tired from the run that I called up and went to sleep. As soon as the lights were on in the morning, I was running again. On and on, from one day to another, I ran. I started counting my paces and timing myself, and just as I guessed, I was doing a little under 7 minutes a mile. Not a record pace, but fast enough. A week went by and there seemed to be no end to this corridor. Sometimes I leaned far out over the rail and looked to the vanishing point to see if I could get a hint of the end of the corridor. Sometimes I thought I could see it, but it never appeared, and really I could only see it and could not see anything. Vanishing far in the distance, straight on the shelf, ran until they disappeared into a tiny point that never changed, never gave a hint that I was approaching an end. For 3 weeks I ran, covering, I estimate, about 1,400, and nothing ever changed. I began to think how strange it seemed that I never met a person of color, not an Asian, not a black person, not a Hispanic, not anything but a sea of white American Caucasians. Was there no diversity in hell? What did this endless repetition of sameness and of uniformity in people and surroundings mean? In the 3rd week, I quit. I felt like this was less. It would be no end. What if the Lord right? What is an number? What if there was no end? Suddenly, my friend, I had known a little over people. I had formed a bond with how I had anyone. So I do. I wanted them to hear talk exactly Larry's back. It took me on long with intensity. I said to find it again. I said anything one on the way. All I could about find days. So there, to fear they would still be slushing drunk. What a reunion. They had wondered desperately what had happened to me. Could remember the day through the alcohol. I left, so that if I didn't drove over. Now I was back, no yet to drink binge drink. As an uphill, no seem to have any more mild psychological attractions. I lived and had to drink only week and keep a moderate. I was here. I also didn't interest. And Ned had thoughts of and was as a girl Brenda who had joined the group said. I didn't drink that much, and when I found it wasn't complete, shootings were moved away. They told us in his body decided they had resolved. Next day, there he was, 8 cakes, like had happened. That was in biscuit. Went up in the morning, all felt hangover, nothing. It was like the day was just as new as our first day here. It's strange here. I wouldn't mind a smoke or another drink, but I don't need a smoke or a drink like I did on Earth. All those cravings are controllable. I was a bit of a celebrity. I had traveled thousands of miles, and everyone wanted to hear my story. The infuriating thing was, there was really nothing to tell. Yes, it's the same as it is here. The people are all white, speak English, and seem to be pretty much the same as us. For 1,000 miles, I found everything along the way was the same as here. There were people living as far down and as far up as I could see, and it never changed. One man, a newcomer I did not recognize, said, "There's only one thing that explains it. The rest of you aren't real, mere creations like the books. My soul is probably in a vat somewhere being pumped full of sensations. You, and you," he said, pointing at 3 of us, "are nothing more than input signals to a single consciousness swimming in a God-created void." I'm not tired of that. We looked at each other and nodded. We could not refute it, but I knew I was real and I assumed everyone else too. We turned away from him. One man paused and started asking me about the density of the people in the side rooms. How many people were staying in the rooms as we traveled along? About the same as here, 3 or 4 people in a room, about 3 empty beds everywhere I went. It seems strange, he said, the lines in his forehead narrowing. Why do you suppose they didn't try to pack us in more or spread us out more? Why a density of 3 or 4? A woman named Betty seemed genuinely depressed. 1,000 miles of books. How many are there? This is going to take forever. I've looked through thousands of books already and I haven't even found a single phrase like biscuits, sack it. How are we supposed to find a whole life story? Betty struck me as pretty, with long, straight red hair that fell around her shoulders. Her youth drew me in a way that surprised and delighted me. I was in a bit of a tizzy. I'd only been away from my wife for a month, but I felt a strong attraction to Betty. Although sexual in part, it seemed purer than that. I did not remember her from before I left on my run. And that should be 30 minutes of chapter 2. If you are here till now, thank you so much for staying. Let me know how I can improve my reading. I am going to look at tips to make my reading more coherent, and the reading is definitely better than the last one. Honestly, I think it's better than the last one. I did not need as much water, and I don't think I made as much mistakes. So thank you for staying till now. Please subscribe if you are still here, and I'll see you tomorrow for chapter 3. Bye.